ethnographies. Ethnographies, as you know very well, last up many years. I mean, you need many years for knowing very well a context and to say something on Malinowski, who was finally a Polish glory, even if he was enrolled in UK university and after in US university. Malinowski started and designed somehow this line, thought that his first ethnography last up in 10 years. He has been in the Trobriand Islands the first time 8 + 2 years with a small period of interruption and pause, a very small period. And in effect, in his journal, he said after many years he was there that he was bored about ethnography also. He was really tired of this hard work that he did with the population of the Trobriand Islands. So in my case, I'm not so far in my ethnography. I generally worked in at-home ethnography, finally in Italy, sometimes in Europe. I started, for example, actually a field work in Corsica, and I had some experience. I started a fieldwork possibility. I'm just trying to understand if it could be possible to continue on Ethiopia. Here the continuity among these different fieldworks is made by the theme, the topic, if you want. I work a lot on biocultural heritage, on link between environmental and cultural issues, on processes of heritagization, is because of I can work also in different contexts. But for Ethiopia, I'm thinking about if there is this possibility. On the contrary, on Corsica, we have started, we are three colleagues of mine, 2 colleagues of mine with me in Corsica 2 years ago, and we are continuing in this year and the next. Generally, I work in Italy, as I said, and the cases that I'm going to explain to you are 2 main Italian cases about, as you see in the title of this conference or lecture, cultural heritage controversies and contested cultural issues. Is that one? The first one I want to introduce to you is a context which is extremely contested, a fieldwork which is extremely contested, and that give to us the possibility of outline some of the themes that I'd like to introduce to you today. The Palio of Siena is a very important and very known traditional race in the city of Siena, which is a very important city in Tuscany, very near to my place, to my neighborhood, and who is so visible and so famous that I think they projected, and there are World Vision emissions for the race of the Palio each year in the 2 days in which this ritual and very ancient tradition of a horse race, ritual horse race, is celebrated. It has the 2nd of July for the Madonna of Provenzano and the 16th of August for the Assumption of the Madonna. So 2 religious dates, 2 Holy Mary celebration for a ritual race, horse race. So you read a bit about the description of horse race twice each year. 10 horses and riders, bareback, so traditional way of riding, not with the saddle, but bareback without saddle, and dressed in traditional and differentiated colors by contrade. The contrade are the city words in some way. The palio of 2nd July, as I said, was for the Madonna di Provenzano, and the other for the palio dell'Assunta, the Assumption of Mary. Sometimes in case of exceptional events or local or national anniversaries deemed relevant and pertinent, this city community may decide for an extraordinary palio. For example, for the Jubilee, it happens that Siena organized a 3rd palio in the year. The last one was in year 2000 to celebrate the entering of the city in the new century, in this case. The corteo storico, so a pageant, a ritual procession, precedes the race, which attracts visitors and spectators from around the world. And as I said, we have the World Vision, TV World Vision for the races. The race itself, in which the jockeys ride bareback, circles the Piazza del Campo. You see on the right images one of the first representation in 15th century of the Palio di Siena in Piazza del Campo. The race has never stopped, even in the years of the Second World War. Think about the importance and the impossibility for the city to give up with this tradition. The race is run for 3 laps of the piazza and usually lasts no more than 19 seconds. They go very speed and violent. It's a violent race, really violent race, and is one of our questions actually. It is common for a few of the jockeys to be thrown off their horses. You are going to see some image. While making the treacherous turn in the piazza, and indeed it is not unusual to see unmounted horses. Sometimes it can win. It sometimes happens that an unmounted horse arrives at the end of the race first, and anyway it is the horse that wins. It's not important that the jockey is above. If the horse arrives unmounted at the end as first, the race is won by the contrada, which own this unmounted horse. This is interesting because it's the horse the protagonist of the race, it's not the jockey. It's not important. Jockey has only the responsibility to drive somehow the horses, but it's the horses that win. Why the palio? The question here is out of the ICH list, but generally, why the palio is a contested object? There has been a strong controversy between the town of Siena, the community of practice, and the national government about the rules that are established for the functioning of the race, and many attack by the animal rights movement that attack the palio of Siena as a savage practice to be suppressed. So the idea of the animal rights movement is that the practices, the traditional practice of the palio is somehow a controversial tradition that they cannot admit. They have put in place a strong campaign of critique, of attack towards this kind of practice, and they arrived in one case to impose to the mayor of Siena and the committee that generally manage and organize all the palio with the different parties, with the different contrade, to adopt some rule, some new rule for, how can I say, ensure the animal welfare, the horse welfare in the race. So, which is the debate today? another question in relationship to the question before. In 2011, a new protocol of rules has been set up by the national government in Italy, which established, according to the more general European rules on animal welfare, which established that any kind of unofficial competition of animals, particularly evidently equids, horse and donkeys, races, have to be stopped because they were unofficial and they happened not in an official ground. I mean the real fund of the herd. I mean which kind of terrain, which kind of ground horses are racing on. And about of this rule, evidently Palio have to change a lot rules of organization of the race, and nonetheless, even if the city have submitted for this year the candidature, the submission for the intangible cultural heritage list to UNESCO because of this enormous visibility, importance, oldness of the feast and of the ceremonials. Now we are going to see something even for understanding the relevance in terms of ritual show, ritual spectacle that you are facing in this tradition. Even if they have applied for the submission, nonetheless they have been refused at the Italian level because there was the the thought that this palio was a risk, an abuse of maltreatment, of malware for animals. So see how much, in some way, the polemics and the critiques of animal rights movement have pushed somehow the critique against the palio, against the traditional races, that an important event as that one has been refused by the Italian government. So it's not Paris that has refused, it's before. Italy has refused to submit Palio di Siena to the ICH list because there was this possibility that animals were not well treated, well considered in the race of Palio. This is extremely important because maybe you have seen about the great debate on corridas, for example, in Spain. Many people has debate about this, and for example in 2010 Catalonia has completely stopped, according to the autonomy that Catalonia has. And now it's a very contested question too, in relationship to the national state of Spain, decided to stop completely the corridas inside the Catalonia region. On the same moment, and on the contrary, France applied with the north of Spain to ICH list for all the corridas that have not as an objective the death of the bulls. What I can say. There are some rituals in Spain and in the south of France where, for example, I don't know if you never seen something of Pamplona, where bulls are simply running into the city and people follow or are followed by the bulls. Have you never seen this? Maybe we are going to see some image after, but it could be interesting because here the bulls are not in menace to be killed by the man, And they applied because this kind of corridas, which were not so at risk for the animal, applied for the ICH list. Bon. What is interesting? 2011, Siena was refused for the application. Corridas in 2010 was blocked in Catalonia. At the same time, corridas where the bulls were not killed applied with France and Spain and the north of Spain to the ICH list. They obtained the nomination as ICH list cultural goods, but after 2 years, under the pressure of animal rights movement, they have been, refused. So, government and the UNESCO board in Paris retired the nomination as a cultural good for humanity. This is interesting because in some way you see here one of the most interesting cases of an ethical pressure on the decision about what we have to consider a cultural heritage. And what I'm saying actually is exactly this question, because Siena has not even reached the possibility to be evaluated by Paris, because by the board of UNESCO in Paris, because the Italian state before decided to not submit the candidature. The debate evidently is the fight between two different ways. We are going to see again this question. Two different ways to deal with locality, belonging and human-animal relationship. Strong consequences on international scenario and also in tourism destination building and management, because have you the idea of how much it could be severe and hard to accept for a big tourist city like, I don't know, Sevilla or Barcelona or Siena, do not have more the shows as corridas or the palio, so it is a real risk. But not only as a tourist attraction, but also in terms of social cohesion. Because what we are going to see immediately after this slide is that this is not only, on the contrary, this is absolutely not at the first stage a tourist attraction. People of Siena said, we are going to do the race even without one tourist. We are not interested on the presence of tourism. Tourism come. If you want to, if they won't come, they can. But we are not interested on. Finally, we joke about this, but it's interesting. In their representation and self-representation, the question is not the tourism, it's not the tourist attraction. The fact is that we cannot do without the palio. This is our identity. This is what we rely on. And finally, cultural heritage as a controversial and complex object, evidently, of research at the very center of the late modernity, even apparently linked to ancient traditional practices. There is a fourth, and we are going to see that point that is solicited by this kind of research, and it is about the role of ethnographer, the position that we place, that we have in the research. We are going to see that, for example, in many of these occasions, ethnographers are called to have, in one case, it has been my role, to be strictly involved in the judicial trial about we are not going to do the feast, to admit the feast. So I've been involved in a court trial as an expert for saying how much is important that we keep continuing to do this ceremonial. It's extremely interesting because, and communities were asking me, were saying to me, please, you have to explain that we cannot give up with this. So I was a translator somehow for the community. So here you touch somehow physically the usefulness of anthropology for the communities. And evidently, what I was just saying, the process of mediation between the Contrade and animal rights movement. Is it possible a mediation? Is it possible a point of agreement between these two so different positions? Look at this, we can also think about to discuss this maybe in the next lesson if we have no time today. I think it could be really interesting. I do this in my courses and it's extremely interesting for me. I have, for example, many students that are vegan or vegetarian and many colleagues of mine that work. I work a lot with colleagues from the United States that are engaged on animal rights movement, and I have very often a strong debate with them. So I think it could be a good exercise theme for debating about some crucial questions. Animal-human relationship, for example, limits of the welfare, what we intend, what we conceptualize as animal welfare, human welfare, and respect, subjectivity, animal subjectivity, and so on. So, new rules, evident. Security measures and safeguard for animal welfare for the horses in this case, but we are going to see that there are some ceremonials where there are not only horses, but for example in the Carresi, there are both cows and horses involved in the ritual, and anti-doping controls, management and control of the training of the ground, medical and vet controls. Other element of extreme interest for us. I said before the position of ethnographer and the methods, the methodology of research. This third point that I outline here, so the necessity to understand deeply the question of anti-doping controls, management and training, and of the ground of race, medical and vet controls and so on, imposed to me to dialogue with other disciplines. So this is not a one discipline research. I need necessarily to be in a multidisciplinary cluster for approach and understand in a very sharp way this kind of theme and topics. So what we face finally, again you see the real place of the campo, in a day where there is no defalio. During the defalio, this part is covered by sand, a very hard level sand, because it is supposed to be the sand that limit the hardness of the contact between the hoof and the ground. So we need sand. They are constraints to put sand on the ground of the place, because it is extremely important also for the defense, for the safeguard of the animal welfare, and also it is somehow a ritual moment. People of Siena said, we are just arrived, we have the sand in place. When they have the sand in place, it means that we are just arrived to the palio. We are just in the proximity of the palio, because the sand is posed the day before of the last rehearsal before the race, the official race, so 4 days before the palio. And at this moment, when they say we have il tufo in piazza, the sand in the place, it means that they are at the moment of the feast. But evidently, year by year, the feasts became also a great show, an extremely hard show, and a very interesting one in terms also of historical stratification somehow. For example, the great pageant, the great corteo that precede during many hours in the afternoon the race, the veritable race of horses, is not an ancient invention. I mean, maybe at the beginning was people of the aristocracy of Siena that walk for arriving in the places where they were going to see the palio. But this rehearsal, this show of the medieval historical pageant, medieval historical procession, is a fascist invention. It's an invention of the period of fascism. And this is extremely interesting because, as many other authoritarian governments, fascism used in a very aware way the propaganda for assessing their power. And in a city as Siena, which was a strong fascist city during the period among the two world wars, this idea of the coming back to the medieval and to put in place the rehearsal of the Greek power, of the communal power, and so on, was somehow the symbol of the glory of the fascism. And fascism put in place this kind of rituals that is evidently for us interesting as a trace, as a sort of memory of a particular codification of the ritual, which is in touch with a particular moment of our history and authoritarian and political authoritarian history. So, as you see, brave exercise, but the ritual competition. The ritual competition is, I'm not here for explaining you the ritual competition because it is another ethnography to tell, because there is many implications in terms of how contrade collect, for example, the money for buying horses and how horses have been chosen and how jockeys are chosen and so on, and all the things that happen in this complex way, even not legal somehow, even very informal, even very incorrect somehow. It is not an official word. I mean, it's a very informal one, and it's extremely interesting, but so complex for telling to you today. But let me say simply that there is a strong ritual competition where people, we are going to see some images, well, a very competitive one. So where there is so much competition, you know, people is extremely involved in the passion and in the partisanism for its proper contrada. So it built a real strong social link, real strong social link. So just some image. Agonism, evidently, local pride, and also evidently social control, because you have powers, strong powers, economic one. On the shoulder of this jockey you see this enormous building, which is one of the most beautiful in the place of Siena, and it is the building of the Monte dei Paschi di Siena, which is the second bank that has been built in Italy in the 15th century. You know, one of the bank institution at the moment is a bit difficult, but one of the main institutions. And it's interesting, in Siena they call the people of the Palio say that the Monte dei Paschi, the bank, is the cow. In the sense that when money served for the Palio, there was the bank. We go to the Monte dei Paschi, and for the Palio, Monte dei Paschi give. It's interesting because why a bank, so even so historical one, is so interested on a traditional ritual? Because the Palio is not only a traditional ritual, it's something that built the social and citizen and civic link in the city. So supporting the Palio means also to make part of the consensus system for the city. So, il tuffo in piazza, sand has been posed, sand has been put, and this is, is extremely interesting, even in terms of social stratification. Around the place, you see again the Monte dei Paschi. Here there is the site of the municipality of Siena, from which the horses can come out in the place, in the square. And around the square there are many places where people can go to see, and are very, very expensive to have these places. And people have to book these places many months before, sometimes years before. Some places are blocked by families of Siena since some decades, or in some cases by centuries. And it's interesting because the social stratification follow the curves of the square, in the sense the most important place where you have to see at the Palio is the mossa, so the start of the race, and there very few persons could stay, so the places are extremely selective, and many people try all life long to have this place, but they cannot. And after, more you are far from the mossa, from the start, you are going to have less expensive places, except for this particular point of the place, that one, which is Curva San Martino, which is you are going to see some image of this, is a very strong and hard curve in the path. So this is very appealing for people, because very often some accident happen in this curve. So many people want to have this moment of breath and emotion, and want the places there. Social stratification. At the center of the square, you have this enormous and huge number of people that enter the place during the afternoon, before that the pageant and the procession start, and wait for hours under the sun in this place, because in this place you have not to pay. It's very interesting, but you are now seeing, you are going, never seeing the horses and the jockeys. You are maybe, if you are happy and fun, you are going to see the cap. The maximum that you can see. And it's interesting because it is the place where the people of the Contrada goes. Because it's not expensive, evidently, but above all because immediately after the race, the block of the barriers are completely broken, and people go, you are going to see, go in the square, go to hug the horses above all, and sometimes to beat the jockeys and other things like that. So it's interesting because it's the people, you know, the basic population of the city that go inside the place. People. Exactly what I was mean. On the image that you have at the left is the moment where people of the contrada that won this particular race go to take the palio. The palio is exactly the drop. The palio was the palio in traditional and ancient Italian language, and was the drop, which is normally painted by an important painter in Italy, but also there have been pali painted by foreign artists, and they go to say to the president of the race, the mossiere, daccelo, give us the palio. And on the other side, you see other moments of dissociability linked to the palio, evidently, the women that are increasingly have a role in this traditional feast, and also the traditional dinners that in many occasions during the years renew somehow the link of contrada. Every month or every 2 months, they are organizing some moment of sociability for the victory or for collecting money from the families and so on. Evidently, the spectacularization of these kind of rituals has positive and negative elements and aspects and consequences, as I outlined before, because on one side the palio has become a very important ritual and a very important resource even for the city. At the same time, it becomes also increasingly a problem, because being so visible, it's not possible to joke about what happened. For example, horse accident or jockey's accident. So horses have been video documented everywhere. As I said, there is the World Vision for each edition. This is Curva San Martino, you see, and it's very hard because you are going down, and at the same time you have this very hard curve in the path. And this is a shoot, I can say an accident in Curva San Martino. This is interesting. You see this pillow, enormous pillow that are here. Precedently were very simple pillows in wool, very artisanal one. After all the procedure and debate about the animal welfare, they are the same of the Formula One. You know, the same pillows, the same enormous protection barrier of the automobilistic races, because they try to reduce the risk of bone accident for horses and jockeys. So there are many concerns about animal abuse and cruelty. Horses, as you know, are very delicate animals. They have very delicate bones. So in effect, sometimes to fall for them means to be hardly broken, and the recovery of broken bones for horses is not as in the far west that they say that it was impossible to be recovered, but anyways extremely hard and long to solve. And very few times a horse that result injured in a bone can come back to ride. So again, so what we are facing here, as I said before, we are facing a strong moment and a strong visibility for a problem that is not only of Siena, as I said, but it is linked to a huge number of rituals, at least in Italy, where medieval rehearsals are very, very present, in which there are horse races and horse processions. The second case is somehow similar, and then I am going to treat analogous terms and questions in the follow of this second ethnographic case, is the case of Carresi of Basso Molise, which pose finally the very similar question. There are three small towns in southern region of Italy where I teach at university. Small towns, I mean 5,000 people, 6,000 people, no more. Beyond village and towns, small towns. And they are strongly linked by this tradition because finally there is a fourth community where there is no more a race, a ritual race, but there is, we are going to see in the next lecture, a procession, but before it was the first one in which there was a ritual race of cows. This is San Martino, the first and more important town. And the other thing interesting that in Uruli and Portocannone, which are the second photos town, are Albanese minorities. So it's interesting also because the tradition that they share with San Martino is a tradition that has become, during the century, a way for integration for these two communities of Albanese people in the area of the southern central Italy. You know that people from Albania comes in Italy during the 16th century in defense of the Pope, called from the Vatican for defending the Pope against the French attack, and George Castriota Skanderbeg, which was their captain, their conductor, come with a group, a very strong group of Albanese warriors, and these warriors set up after in Italy, leaving an enclave along the Adriatic coast, an enclave of Albanese people that, since from the 16th century, still keep remaining in Italy, speaking the ancient Albanese, this is very interesting, the Albrecht language, and conserving many of their tradition. In this case, Carresi are not an Albanese tradition, are a tradition of this area of Molise, but as many people from Albania start to work at the service of families of this country, they become expert of this kind of use, and through the participation to the rituals, they make somehow a form of inclusion, at the point that they decide to celebrate in the same way their particular feast, their particular patron saints, in the same manner, in the same way. The case of Carresi of Basso Molise is again a question of a legal controversy. There are evidently the local communities of practice, and according to this community of practice, the human-animal relationship is characterized by solidarity, sense of cooperation, intimacy toward the animal involved in the ceremonial and the people that do the ceremonial. From an external point of view, for example, of animal rights movement, of the police, even of the vet controller, since the 80s, because it's a very long time problem for this practice, there has been several attacks from animal rights movement against Carresi because they suspect of abuses, doping against animal, cow and horses involved, National Association for Animal Protection, Querelle, and in 2012-2013, official court trials. As I said before, we were involved in a judicial cause. In 2015, in fact, a dramatic upside down happened in the situation of these three small towns, and in our ethnography, I speak the plural, is not a majestic plural, because this is so complex research that we are a small equipe. I'm working on this ethnography with another colleague of mine, and because it's extremely hard to document, and we spent really days and nights with the communities, and also because we have decided it could be interesting in methodological terms for you, as these are competitive communities, we decided to be two at least, because generally, as we are seeing, the towns are divided in two main parties, two main opposite parties. We decided methodologically to use a technique of relationship with the community, which is called encliquage, or encliquement in English, which means that we need to be somehow involved in the parties, partisan. I work only with a party, and my colleague work only with another. Somehow people also believe that I am a partisan of my party. Why this is so important? It's true. I'm a partisan of my party. It's really true. I'm a giovanotta, and my colleague is a giovane, because the parties are young and more young. I'm a more young. But why is so important the encliquement? Because being competitive communities, they have secrets. They have things to share secretly inside the party. If I am not inside, if I'm not in a sort of path with my party, they are not going to say to me everything. I absolutely have to be committed with. Otherwise, I'm an external observer. The first time I start to be in this field work, people say to me, you are an animalist activist, you are a journalist, what you want from us? Why do you come here? Why do you are here with, stop the camera please, and explain to us who you are, why you are here, and what you want from us. So if I didn't try to establish this emotional link somehow, I never had their trust. I never had their secrets. And what I know actually, and Katia, my colleague, has from her party, there is a very beautiful and private and strong moment in every one of these rituals, in which, in the night before the race, after all the people is going to bed, very, very few men of the party have a last meeting, a very, very last meeting in the night. And in this last meeting, they decided last element of the strategy. After 2 years that we were there, we were admitted to this reunion. And it is interesting because we are women, both women. It has been interesting also in terms of gender relationship. At the beginning was, the first thing that they asked to us was, but you are scared about horses? You are scared about cows? Maybe you are not going with us to the start because the start is too much hard for a woman. And after they experienced that we could afford and we could do all things we have done, made things during this ethnography. You know, I make the video documentation of the races being in, I can say, back on the motor with the video camera like this, looking the char in front of me that was coming, and beautiful. One of the marvelous things that happened to me in doing ethnography. But anyway, or trying to go in the chariot, nevermore. But what I say is that if we don't make this link, this bond, somehow with the party, we never known the core of this community practice. And it is because when we arrive to the judicial case, people say you are the sole people that can translate for us the sense of what we do in the Carresi in a legal language. So you are our translator. It is extremely interesting. You have to be so inside for being invested by the community of this role. So let us see something about the community of practice. It's a very complex, as I said, rituals, many peoples involved, both on the chariot, both with the horses, both on the cows, both on the earth, on the ground, because they have to, we are going to see a small video and you realize how much of techniques of shared knowledge and of sense of time and of sharing and participation, collective trust one on the others for doing this. Cows is interesting also in terms of biodiversity. The cows that are used for these races are from a particular line, livestock of cows, which is an autochthonous line, which are not so fat and very strong as a structure, and they have the structure of the legs that permit them to pass, as we said with the horses. In the sense they are like this, and when they gallop, because they gallop, they can pass with the hoof without hurting themselves, because otherwise they are going to stop. They feel ache and they stop it. So they are selected for this, and they do only this. They are trained during all the year for doing this. You are going to see a video and you are understanding more the mechanism. But what I wanted to make look to you is more that the community of practice is above all a bond between people and animals and transmission of knowledge. And in these rituals is absolutely easy to understand. Babies and children spend all the afternoon at the stables. Mother have difficulty to pick them home for doing homeworks, because they spend every afternoon of their life, winter, spring, summer, and so on, with the animals of the stable of the party. How we can say that there is no good link between human and animal in this situation. This is normal, and you know, this is for children, but about men, the woman, the wives of people that is part of the parties of the Carresi, said that their husbands spend more time with cows than with them. So they say that we are not worried about, because they spend all time with cows, which are finally not cows. They are how can I say cows? Nor bulls, nor female. Okay, no reproductive bulls. Because the problem with the female would be, with the cow, would be that if they are pregnant, evidently, and the problem of estrus, the problem of desire, because they are going to lose the races for the hormonious activity. On the contrary, the male, not reproductive, is perfect because it is strong like a bull, but not taken by desire. Is that one the question? And so, leaks. And you see, in these communities, you start, today in the morning, I received the first videos of this year, because the races are going to be in the 3rd of April, the 3rd of May, and the 20th of May. The first videos of the first town where Carrese is going to be, with the children that are organizing the small Carrese. This is typical of the living rites, you know, the living feast, where evidently the transmission of knowledge and the transmission of passion is absolutely not broken, but on the contrary is still very, very active. And also modernity and tradition. The use, for example, of tattoos with symbols of the chariots. This is, as you see, a chariot with the cows and the symbol of the patron saint of this particular town, which is Ruri, that are running for the Holy Cross, the Holy Cross. And the most curious forms of celebration. I mean, we are here in a procession after the end of the ritual, and people arrive to celebrate the participation. This is of the party, of my party. And Giovanotti is the name of the partito, and they arrive to put everywhere the sign of their belonging. And this is the colors, evidently, red and yellow for the Giovanotti, and white and blue for the Giovani. There is a third party, a very minus one. It is interesting also. That is the consequence of a split of the Giovanotti party, because the Giovanotti party is one of the things that I like to be from the Giovanotti and of the Giovani, is the popular party, and is a very litigious one. It's very strongly and fighting one. So sometimes they split, and in every country comes a third chariot, a third party, which is called Giovanissimi, so more young. Rituals, evidently, so the cows during the procession have the symbols of the saint beyond the horns, all the decoration that link the belonging to the chariot, and this is a very interesting moment, because the night before the race, all the people that will be involved in the race, as it's very dangerous to do Carresi, these are strong people, sometimes they receive the injuries and so on, have a missa, a celebration, a ritual, religious Catholic celebration for the rituals, and all the people pose the camp of the day after, the cat that they are going to dress the day after, for being blessed, for being blessed by the priest. What happens? In 2015, as I said, this fight among animal rights movements and the towns where carresi were celebrated arrived at its maximum moment of polemics, and the animal rights movement deposed a request of stop, a request of interruption, official interruption by the procurer, so the procurer of the local courts of the carresi. And the procurer, pressed and also convinced somehow by the fact that at the national level the law on the safeguard of animal welfare was being renewed, accepted and sent a lot of policemen in the stables. They closed the stables, and he started an official trial against the parties. So in 2015, the towns and the parties don't make the carresi. We were there. It was the third year we were doing this research. So we documented evidently all the, how can I say, the longing and the suffering for this incredible stop of a secular tradition. In the first town that you see, maybe they are doing the race since 4th century. And in the first time where, that I say, now it's a procession, but before was also race Larino, the ritual race is mentioned since the 842, without one. 842 after Christ. Maybe is more than 1,000 years that there is this tradition in this country. Okay, so imagine people was mad completely, and we documented. You see here the dressing. This is the main entrance. Presentation of the town. Benvenuti, welcome to Ururi and Rip. So the town is finished. And here also is interesting. I'm not going to translate all the manifesto in Tazebao, but it's interesting anyway. Someone to translate said this is a photo that I like so much because he is the chief executive of the police in this moment in the region, and it was a manifest written by the people, the population, that say, "You have stolen to us history, actuality, and future." So not only the past, but you have stolen everything. Because actuality and future is also because they are very aware that the tradition are also the main resource, the main element of visibility in the global arena of tourism, and also for small commerce, even in the region. The tradition of the past has to be respected and non-stretched. Take back what is ours. Let's go how much rhetoric also of belonging, of cultural possession and cultural ownership. United for our carrese, sure. People that manifested with the policeman is still him. It's interesting even. This man used a lot this arena. Because he is someone very, very, how can I say, ambitious. And after this moment of great visibility on the local, he had an important upgrade of his career. So what I say to you, when you do ethnography, you understand in a very, very deep way on the territory all the elements that happen in the territory. So, because for you, it's not the policeman. For me, it's someone that I recognize, I know which kind of role he has in the territory. And I understand also the motivation for which he could be interested on going to the extreme level, extreme point of evidence in this kind of polemics and fight. And also a lot of collective support, T-shirts of every kind. We are with you, hands off from the Carrese. Hands off of the Carrese, and this is interesting also. ENPA is the National Association for the Protection of Animals in Italy, and was one of the animal rights movement, was protagonist of this accusation against the races. Misters of the ENPA, you are able to take care of your children as we take care of our cows, of our animals. So it was provoking, evidently. Saying this thing that I said before, so it's not true that we have no care of our animals. You don't understand which kind of link we have with our animals. And one of the last, a town, a village without tradition is without dignity. So, just some question for concluding and for proposing to you maybe some occasion for discussion in the next meeting, even because I still remain a bit on this line of debate, even if moved to another specific context of observation and ethnography. The controversies about the intangible cultural heritage shared and practiced by communities of the Carrese have to be rooted, as I said, in a late modern discourse about traditions. We have not to think simply about a contrast among different positions. There is a mainstream discourse that we face here, and it's because of this research, it could be extremely sharp for reading this element. This discourse, this mainstream discourse, is the discourse on traditions, on backwardness, of the folklore, against new human sensibilities toward animals, which is typical of the urban cosmopolitan culture. So, animal as a pet, as an animal as a treasure, animal as a small joke. I amuse myself to put some photos a bit disturbing maybe, but it is this idea is a very metropolitan one, because we have only some type of animal which are extremely protected. I am also a dog owner, so I have a very petized dog, small dogs. You know that in the last years we assisted to a genetic reduction of dogs, increasingly genetic reduction of dogs, and we can also thought about the fact that this is also a sort of abuse toward animals, because it is not natural finally. But anyway, this is typical of the urban and cosmopolitan approach to have a petized animal, joke animal, play play animal. And this make it difficult to understand the particular rural relationship between human and animals, which was, moreover, a cooperative relation. So they do something with the others. And in this doing something with the others, both were stressed and they had sufferings, they felt sadness in some moment, and so on. So they feel together. On the contrary, in the petization and urban reduction of animals, we thought about animals that lose as their characteristic of animality somehow. And also, we protect only some type of animal. We don't consider any kind of animal as petizable, so transformable in a pet. Only dogs, cats, somehow small pigs, somehow small rabbits, but no more other. Fishes, some bird, and even there is very, very difficult to establish where is the line of abuse, where is the line of, for example, prison and cage for petized animals. You know, my friends of human animal studies in USA, with whom I discussed a lot in our Congress and even on the network, for some of them, even to go bareback on a horse is a violence. So in the purest approach to non-violent mode to relation with animals, any kind of hegemonic position of man on the animal is considered a violence. Well, this is a very good point to discuss somehow, because it is a new sensibility, evidently. We have behind our shoulders at least 7,000 years of domestication of horses, 7,000 years of domestication of dogs and chicken, and 4,000 years of domestication of horses. What does it mean that we cannot ride a horse? Because it is colonialism, it's post-colonial way of being hegemonic toward the horse. It's interesting. I don't want to joke about this. I take it very seriously. But anyway, I solicited you to this debate. It's a very challenging theme somehow. So, we are strongly opposed to the rural pastoral approach to the cooperation among human and non-human animal species. And here I mentioned only two. Really is a huge amount of literature and critical question, like Donna Haraway, when the species meet. Donna Haraway is this visionary, theoretical anthropologist from USA. She is actually enrolled in Columbia University, and she's been worked before on, I don't know, maybe you have heard about on Manifesto Cyborg, and she worked a lot on postmodern debate, and one of the most influenced people in the critical debate actually in the USA. And she writes this When Species Meet, which is exactly what I was saying before, the debate about the transformation of the idea of animal in the postmodern society. And another approach, but very interesting also, Jean-Pierre Bigard, Les Animaux Domestiques, which is another line, if you want, of the debate, focused mostly on which is the history of the relationship between domestic animals and humans, and what we consider as domestic. And last one, some question still, Media evidently have a strong role in these use arenas. Think about the paleo, as I said, but also in the Carresi case, all the questions began to be very, very hard when some local television projected some strong images of some accident. So the visibility on TV, for example, has to be responsible for this strong increase of the problem of the debate about the malware for animals. They are mainly responsible for building the tourist destination, evidently, even intangible cultural heritage place of interest, but at the same time, they are also the resonant cases of the animalist polemics, through a targeted and spectacular use of the images and a communication based on shock and emotion. Here you see some global campaigns on the slaughtering of the turkey during the Thanksgiving, or about the difference among chicken and pets that we don't eat, about the dogs that are imprisoned for ritual fight, or anyway simply imprisoned and not given to adoption to family. This is an interesting images and very interesting movement. From this research I started another part of this research on the movements, the animal rights movements, and the way they communicate also. And this is online animal rights activism. They are very, very strong, very, very assertive. Even the image is eloquent, have you seen? Many publications. This is one of them. Beyond Animal Rights is one of the extreme frontier of the engagement on animal rights movements. But 2 years ago, a colleagues from Pennsylvania University licensed a very interesting book on animal terrorism. So, like for the first attack of Greenpeace for ecologism and so on, there are many movements that theorize violence and violent attack for defending animal rights. So you see how much is important this patchwork of movements that is activated by the defense of animal rights. And animal rights movements, finally, is what I was introducing, have to be considered in the fieldwork as a very new, challenging, and bipartisan. Bipartisan, I mean also in Italian terms, so nor left, not right. I mean, I cannot collocate, I cannot put in one party the animal rights activism. For example, Berlusconi has funded a small movement for animal rights. No? So it's not a battle exclusively of the left party, not at all. As a very new, challenging, bipartisan and transversal political subject, as well as ecological movement. As I said, Greenpeace, for example, LGBT rights, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual movements, gender and queer studies and activism, and so on. So, studying this kind of problem, we are also thinking about this level of the debate. Because if I can say something about methodologically, what it is, the indication that a research like this gives to us, is that we cannot actually think about ethnography of rituals, ethnography of traditions, like an ancient object. We have to think about this like one of the most interesting enjeux, I can say issue, in which is visible all the movements of the society. That's all. Thank you. So, if if you have some question, even the next time, it could be good for me and interesting to debate with you. And anyway, by mail. Letizia.bindi, I put every time at the beginning of my conferences. You can write to me every time.